Shabbat Shalom, friends. Shabbat Shalom. Many times I stand before you and I speak about the principles of Judaism, and I relate to the ideas and the principles that constitute the Jewish law, the Jewish halacha. How do we set what is good and what is right? How do we set what should be done? Those are principles, the meta law, principles of the law, such as the most known of them, the tikkun olam, the fixing, the healing of the world, the asita hayashar v'hato, that you should do what is right and what is just, kvod habriot, the dignity of people, darkei shalom, ways of peace, chaviv adam, shenibra b'tzelem, beloved is the human being who was created in the God image, and so on. These are the principles. On their base we set the laws of Judaism. If needed, we change the laws of Judaism, because the law, the spirit of the law, is the one that should prevail. What should we do when we meet a violation of those laws, a violation that leads to horrible and devastating results? And this is what I would like to discuss with you today, and it has a context, matters that have come this week in the several groups of rabbis in America, in Israel, and here, regarding the one of the progressive rabbis, which means that the matter is concerning us more than other cases. But then this morning came the devastating news on the disaster in Mount Meron yesterday, and as it bothers me, I would like to add that as well to the discussion. Those are obviously very different matters from one another, but they have a common denominator, which is the violation of the spirit of the law. So let's start with the disaster in Meron. For those who haven't yet heard, 45 people were killed and more than 100 were wounded, some of them hardly, in a disaster of trampling yesterday between 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning at the space of the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Meron. We were celebrating a small Lag BaOmer here in our yard. It was the first time that we met in person after the year of COVID. And we spoke about the holy place of Meron and said that this is a place of local scent. Rabbi Shimon, he was like a local scent of northern Israel, of the Galilee, for Jews and for Muslims. And it's not a big court. It's true, it can contain a few hundreds, maybe 1,000, 2,000 years, but every year the traditional pilgrimage have become an event that gets masses of people. And yesterday there were more than 100,000 people, obviously more than the place can contain. So warnings on the fact that the place is not set for such a huge events have been ongoing, and years have been, it has been commented. Now in the newspapers, what you can see is the warning that was put forward about the dangers of this space, from formal and non-formal, stakeholders. And there are complaints to the people who gather there and to the police and everyone looking for who is to be blamed in the disaster. That's humane, but it doesn't help. The main message in this regard is that our heart is with those who lost their life. We send condolences and chama comfort and to the family. We wish and we pray for refuah shlema, for healing to those who were wounded again, and to the families. And we are committed to assist. Our movement in Israel is assisting with blood donations, with general donations, giving our hand, giving our spirit. That's what matters. And it doesn't even matter that those who were there are mainly Haredi ultra-Orthodox. Jews feel one another. Jews feel one another. Having said that, with all the cautiousness and with all the compassion needed, one needs to say that from the point of view of the organizers and the police, and from the point of view of those who participated, there are questions to be asked. not as looking for blames, not as pointing a finger, and maybe not in the immediate phase, but in due course. For the point of view of the organizers, there wasn't a persisting on procedure, there wasn't clear definitions of what is right, is what is wrong, what can be done, what cannot be done, and there wasn't enforcement in a situation which is clear that is clear and present danger. By the way, I'm not even talking about COVID. It was clear that there was a decision not to enforce COVID protocols in the event. If we look on the newspaper, there was still, you can still find from 2 days ago an article in Ynet says that this is the greatest gathering in the world since COVID, with a little bit, as Israeli, I can say, with a little bit of Israeli arrogance. Ah, look, we can do things that others cannot do. Others don't do. From the point of view of those who participated, you can say, what do you want from them? You know, but there is a pattern of behaviors of individuals and of groups that presume that the regulations are not for them, that the regulations do not apply for them. And it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine even if we violate the regulations. And here it goes to, we are standing on a slippery slope that leads to disasters. Now, I'm also Israeli. I also don't like regulations. I also don't like to be told. But it's not in my hands, mainly when one is in leadership position. If there are regulations, they comply to all. They apply to all. Again, just to be clear, I'm not looking for blames. I'm analyzing with your situation. There are orientations, there are tendencies, and those tendencies of not enforcing and not obeying have consequences, as we see. I am aware that in Israel and in diaspora, there are many people who are upset on the Haredi people, the Haredi communities, for a variety of reasons. And part of it is the feeling that Haredi people comes across as we know better than you what needs to be done. Your regulation doesn't apply to us. And I'm, again, not talking in a blaming way. It was a terrible tragedy. It happened. It happened and could have been avoided if we would have doing things differently. If we would have applied the spirit of the law, not just the regulation, but the spirit of the law. You should do what is right and just, vasita yashar v'tov, tikkun olam, making the measurements to fix the world, to heal the world, and kvod habriot, the dignity for all human beings. And with that note of talking about a disaster that could have been avoided, I'd like to go to the second topic, also complicated and unpleasant to touch with, and also got to do with the feeling of individuals that the law does not apply to them. And I'm talking about Rabbi Sheldon Zimmerman and the allegation that has been coming out in the last 2 weeks in our networks, which refer to things that happened some 20 years ago. Let me give you in short the background. Rabbi Sheldon Zimmerman was of the prominent leaders of progressive Judaism in America. He was the rabbi of Temple Emmanuel in Texas. He was the rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York, where at the moment Rabbi Buchdel, Angela Buchdel is serving, known to many of us. He was the president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the main rabbinic association of the Reform movement in the world, and the president of the Hebrew Union College, our institution, which ordains rabbis. In the year 2000, the CCR had suspended him for what was then communicated as personal relationship, inappropriate personal relationship, which violated the ethical code. That was what communicated back then to the communities, to the movement. And I can testify that as a student, first year student, in 2000, 2001, I started that academic year in AGC. That was what, I was first year student, that was what communicated to us, personal relationship that violated the ethical code. Then the new president came in, David Ellenson, Rabbi Professor David Ellenson, who is a great caliber as a scholar and as a rabbi, so it kind of drifted away and to some extent was forgotten. But those things have a tendency that if they're not taken care of, then they will come back again because they haven't been dealt with properly. And here I'd like to quote a few lines that was put forward by Rabbi Harold Joseph in Temple Isaiah, Temple Ishaya, Massachusetts, and he would put it, he had put it better than I will manage to put it. So I'm quoting from Rabbi Joseph. He said following: "We have now learned of credible allegation of predatory behaviors that are far more serious than we first revealed. And with those revelations concern that inadequate steps were taken to investigate more thoroughly or possibly, and much worse, to respond to what was known. While it is unclear what was known to those responsible for the discipline of Rabbi Zimmerman when he first resigned his position as the president of the Hebrew Union College. And it is now clear that there was much more than should have come to light. Whether he was protected by the system that did not fully and properly follow up and investigate the allegations that were brought forward, or was protected by a system that did not give proper weight to the gravity of those allegations, is unclear. In either case, the gravity of his predatory behavior and the consequences of his soul-shattering actions should have resulted in his expulsion from the ranks of Jewish leadership, and it did not. He went on and worked for major national Jewish organizations, then became rabbi of yet another congregation in our movement. These revelations have shaken the very foundation of our reform movement and the larger Jewish community institutions, and have properly called into question culture of permissiveness and inadequate respect for women in particular, and the rights of all vulnerable souls generally. They come at the time when in recent weeks related instances is insufficient responding to the ethical bridging of the path of others which in our movement have come for already inspiring significant concerns and deep conversations. Now he continues, I quote, to their credit, the current leadership of the CCAR, the rabbinic organization, the AGC, the college have already committed and begun processing and evaluate how this kind of behavior could have gone unchecked for so long, and how much more there is to uncover, and how to establish practices, systems, and policies that will ensure, as much as possible, at the same time for all serves a wake-up call for our Jewish community institution to examine how this was even possible, and to accept our responsibility to engage in thorough soul searching, asking ourselves if there are ways in which, even unconsciously, we have contributed to the contributing to environments that allow this kind of behavior to take place at all. End of quote. Those are very saddening matters, and mainly from my perspective, the first thing is first to acknowledge the pain and to take responsibility on that, understand that we need to search our soul. We didn't follow those principles that I was talking about, do what is right and what is just, fixing the world, ways of peace, dignity of the Gentiles. On the contrary, we failed. So I acknowledge the brave women, some of them rabbis women, who expose bravely and in pain. And, you know, we, Temple Emmanuel, Johannesburg, we made a big deal when the Carlebach matter came to the front. And in a way, it was easier for us. This is a, you know, Orthodox rabbi in America and so on. Here, it's a rabbi from the heart of our establishment. I was hoping that in our ranks, it cannot happen. It was proven to be wrong. There is no guarantee. There's no assurance. It can happen everywhere, including here. Thus, we need to be vigilant, and we need to be proactive, not reactive. One, to prevent further assaults, and two, to create a climate of transparency and of respect. We are responsible, and we'll do it. We will check again our procedure. We will check what is that we display. What we see now, what happens when we try to close the matters quietly, not make a big deal, just, you know, put him out of the way and so on. There wasn't an explanation of what happened. And now the synagogue in New York says to the movement, to congregate, to the Rabbinic Association, you didn't communicate to us properly what happened. We didn't know how severe the case was. How do we create a healthy environment? How do we portray the message that we don't hide? We take responsibility. What do we do when somebody, man or woman, obviously a child, complains on another congregant, on somebody who walks with the community, on the rabbi? We cannot say it's not happening in our midst. We'll cross the bridge when we'll meet her. We cannot say. We need to be clear and transparent in that. Now, I'd like to share with you a few lines, yet again, a quote that was published by the Women Rabbinic Network, and they say, what is the expectations? And I'd like to share with you what the expectations of the Women Rabbinic Networks are sharing with the movement and with the institution. So we call upon the movement partners, so on, all the partners, to do the following concrete steps. One, commit to full independent review of past complaints brought to your institution to ensure justice was appropriately carried out and where needed, rectified unsolved complaints. This includes examining past settlements and releasing survivors from silent contracts, like non-disclosure agreements and so on. One. Two, commit to the highest level of transparency that is legally available or forthcoming investigation by publicly naming the types of abuse and discovered and the extent of problems uncovered. Three, commit to holding those found to be predators and enablers accountable by either creating or reinforcing a clear system of professional and religious accountability. Four, commit to ensure that both individual members and institutions as a whole will engage with the survivor-centered trauma-informed teshuva process, repentance. Five, commit to providing therapeutic resources for those survivors who wish to use them. And six, commit to a full safety and respect climate survey to evaluate institutional culture and put into place the policies, standards, and processes to ensure safety for all, including the ongoing promotion of a feedback, rich, and retaliation-free environment to support safe and respected culture, end quote. This is the request and the expectations that my colleagues from the Women Rabbinic Association are asking and defining as their expectations as a women that I appreciate and respect. They are my friends, my allies, my colleagues. The expectations are presented to all and me in the midst of Jewish leadership. My duty as the rabbi is first to acknowledge that reality, which is unpleasant and unflattering. Second, to be the best friend and the best ally I can be, to listen, to stand beside, to believe, not to dismiss. And I'm not doing them a favor by doing that. I'm fulfilling my duty. And finally, for the sake of all of us, and mainly for the sake of our kids, our sons and our daughters, to make it as clear as can be that our space is respectful, that our space is secured on all the scale of behaviors, from the random inappropriate comment to the worst scenario when somebody takes rooms to dark, somebody takes kids to a dark room and doing dodgy things. All over the scales, there's zero tolerance to that. That's my message for tonight. We'll talk about it further. And we will update you, we'll keep you updated. I'm sure we'll discuss in MENCOM and we'll see how we appoint people, how do we make sure, by the way, we have for the team a designated officer, which is Christine McIntosh, that's for the team. We have to make sure that also in the level of the congregation, there is a clear grievance procedure and so on. And anyway, the responsibility is on all of us, but mainly on me, because I am a rabbi who is a male, and people from my species for generation took advantage of their privileges in order to act out predator behaviors. So the burden of proof is on me and on other male rabbis. In both matters that I've spoke about today, both of them are uneasy and unpleasant. The disaster in Meron and the disaster of inappropriate behavior on behalf of fellow rabbis. What's important is not to beat on somebody else's chest and explain what others need to do in order to change themselves. No, we need to be the change we would like to be. We need to take responsibility on our transformation. And then, maybe, first I want to say it's doable. It's doable. And it's a transition we must be doing. But then if we do what we can to facilitate it, to promote it, then may it come to pass that we will be part of this change that will come in the general society, first in our community, then general society, when it comes to gender-based violence, when it comes to predator behaviors. We will follow the principle of the Jewish law that we would like to work for, to promote for. Again, tikkun olam, fixing the world. Ve'asita hayashar v'hatov, that you should do what is right and what is just. Kvod habriot, the dignities of all persons. Darkei shalom, way of peace. And chaviv adam shenivra b'tzelem, beloved is the humankind that was created in God's image. Amen. So be it. Amen. So be it. Thank you for listening to me. And I promise you that we'll take it forward. And if you'd like to speak about it further, that I'm here and others are here. Okay. Thank you.